Ben had always been an experienced hiker, but tonight something was different. The forest, once familiar and safe, now seemed vast and foreboding. He had been walking for hours, trying to navigate his way out, but the trail had vanished under a blanket of darkness. The night air was unnaturally cold, and the only sound was the rhythmic crunch of his boots against the forest floor. His flashlight, flickering intermittently, did little to cut through the oppressive darkness that surrounded him. The beam wavered, casting fleeting shadows that seemed to dance and move with a mind of their own. With every step, the trees seemed to grow thicker, more twisted, as if the forest itself was closing in around him. Ben stopped for a moment, wiping the sweat from his brow. The air felt heavy, as though the very atmosphere was pressing in on him. He glanced at his phone, hoping for a signal, but it was useless. The screen was black, as if mocking his helplessness. He sighed, checking his compass, which pointed in every direction except the one he needed. Panic began to set in, but he shook it off. He had been through tougher situations than this. Still, something gnawed at him, something that couldn't be explained. Just as he was about to take another step, a low growl broke the silence. Ben's heart skipped a beat, his body freezing in place. The sound was distant, but unmistakable. Something large and dangerous was nearby. His mind raced. A bear? A mountain lion? But the growl wasn't like any animal he'd ever encountered. It was deep, guttural, and it sent a chill straight to his bones. The beam from his flashlight swept across the darkness, but there was nothing. His breath quickened as the growl echoed again, closer this time. He wasn't alone. Ben's instincts kicked in. He turned to run, but before he could take a step, the shadows around him seemed to move. And then through the trees, he saw them. Eyes, glowing, watching him. His chest tightened, and for the first time he felt the true weight of fear in this once familiar forest. He wasn't just lost, he was being hunted. Ben's heart raced as the growl faded into the distance, leaving behind an eerie silence. His breath came in shallow gasps, each one colder than the last, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was moving just beyond his sight. He stood frozen, his legs trembling beneath him, trying to make sense of what he had heard. The rustling of leaves sounded faint but distinct, as though something was prowling through the underbrush, just out of view. His mind raced. Was it a wolf, or something far worse? He had heard the stories, the ones whispered by locals about the creatures that haunted these woods, but he had never believed them. Not until now. Ben's pulse pounded in his ears, and with each rustle, his fear intensified. The noises were subtle at first, a snap of a twig, the shift of branches, but then they grew louder, closer. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, as if a cold breath was brushing against his skin. He couldn't help but feel the weight of eyes watching him from every angle. His senses were on high alert. Each crackle of the leaves underfoot seemed amplified, and the distant howls sent a shiver down his spine. He couldn't tell where they were coming from, but they echoed through the trees, eerie and hollow. A wolf's howl, yes, but deeper, somehow more haunting, more alive with malice. It wasn't the cry of a creature simply calling to its pack. It was something else, something darker. Ben's hands trembled as he gripped the flashlight tighter, its beam slicing through the blackness like a fragile thread of hope. But as his light swept across the trees, there was nothing. No movement, no shadow, just the same oppressive darkness. He took a cautious step forward, his breath catching in his throat. The rustling grew louder. He spun around, his eyes scanning desperately, but again, nothing. Was it the wind? His mind screamed at him to run, but his body refused to move. The howls pierced the air again, louder this time, and Ben's stomach twisted. It wasn't just the sound of an animal. It was the sound of something hunting, something that had been tracking him, something that knew exactly where he was. Every instinct told him to flee, but Ben felt rooted to the spot, a mixture of dread and curiosity anchoring him in place. What was out there? What was lurking just beyond the reach of his flashlight's beam? The unknown was far more terrifying than the growls, and yet Ben couldn't tear his eyes away. The tension in the air felt like it was pressing down on him, suffocating him, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to make a choice. He wasn't sure what was more dangerous, what was chasing him, or the fear that was freezing him in place. Ben's pulse hammered in his ears, a deafening rhythm that drowned out all other sounds. His mind raced, desperately trying to process the eerie howls and the feeling of something or someone closing in on him. He wasn't sure which direction to run anymore. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. His body moved on autopilot, pushing him forward when suddenly his foot caught on an unseen root. His ankle twisted beneath him with a sickening crunch, and he collapsed to the ground with a grunt of pain. His breath hitched as he clutched his leg, the sharp throb of pain shooting up his spine. He tried to push himself up, but the injury was worse than he had thought. Each movement sent waves of agony through his body, and for a moment he simply lay there, immobilized, his vision swimming. Panic surged through him. He couldn't stay on the ground, not with something hunting him. His hands, trembling from both fear and pain, scrambled across the cold, damp earth, trying to find purchase as he attempted to rise. The pain in his leg was nearly unbearable, but his mind screamed that he had no time. He needed to move. He needed to escape. His heart raced, each second feeling like an eternity. Then, just as he finally pushed himself halfway up, he froze. A pair of glowing eyes appeared from the shadows. Ben's breath caught in his throat, his body locking up as he stared into the luminous gaze. His heart skipped a beat. The eyes, predatory yet eerily calm, were fixed on him. It was too dark to see the creature fully, but the intensity of those eyes, the way they shimmered in the darkness, sent a chill through him. For a moment, time seemed to slow as he locked eyes with the creature. The world around him became insignificant, all his fear and pain fading into the background as his mind tried to comprehend what was before him. It wasn't a bear or a mountain lion. It was a wolf, a massive, powerful creature, its fur blending seamlessly into the shadows. The air around him seemed to grow colder as the wolf stepped forward, its gaze unwavering, almost intent. It wasn't just watching him, it was studying him. Ben's heart pounded and his body instinctively recoiled, but he was trapped. He couldn't run, not with his injured leg. The wolf's eyes remained locked on his, unblinking, as if deciding whether to attack or offer some sort of mercy. Ben's mind raced. Was this a predator, or was it something else? Fear gripped him, but there was something else, too. A strange sense of curiosity, a pull toward the creature that he couldn't explain. Something about the wolf's presence felt oddly familiar. It wasn't just an animal, it was something far more profound, something that couldn't be understood with logic alone. Ben's breath came in ragged gasps as he stared at the wolf. His mind was reeling, his body aching from the fall, but the creature before him seemed to defy all logic. It should have attacked. He was vulnerable, injured, an easy target, but the wolf didn't make a move to pounce. Instead, it stood there, watching him with those intense, glowing eyes. Time stretched on, seconds feeling like minutes, and in that surreal stillness, something strange happened. The wolf took a step closer, its movements slow and deliberate. Ben's heart skipped a beat as the creature lowered its head and sniffed the ground near his leg, the area where he had twisted his ankle. His first instinct was to pull away, to fight, but something in the wolf's gaze held him in place, almost as if it were communicating with him silently. It wasn't a predator. There was no aggression, no hunger in those eyes, just a quiet understanding that sent a shiver through Ben's body. His body remained frozen, caught between fear and a strange sense of trust. The wolf's nose brushed against his leg, and Ben winced from the pain. But instead of snapping or growling, the wolf nuzzled him gently, as though it knew exactly where the injury was. The warmth of its breath against his skin was oddly comforting, a stark contrast to the cold fear that had gripped him just moments before. Ben's confusion deepened. Why wasn't it attacking him? Why wasn't it showing any signs of hostility? The wolf nudged him again, this time pushing its head against his side, urging him to move. Ben, unsure of what was happening, hesitated. But the creature's touch was insistent, its nudging persistent, as though it was trying to tell him something, as if it understood the urgency of the moment. Despite the pain in his leg, Ben pushed himself to his feet, leaning heavily against the wolf. With each step, the wolf moved alongside him, guiding him, not with force, but with a strange, unwavering patience. It was as though the wolf knew exactly what to do. As Ben limped, the wolf stayed close, watching over him with every movement. It wasn't just guiding him, it was protecting him. There was something about the wolf's presence that was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just an animal, Ben couldn't help but feel that it was more. a protector, a companion, perhaps even a guide. The thought of the wolf being his salvation never crossed his mind, but in that moment, it became clear. He wasn't alone in these woods. Whatever dangers lurked in the forest, the wolf had chosen him to keep him safe, and that realization filled him with an overwhelming mix of gratitude and awe. In the midst of the uncertainty, the pain, and the fear, the wolf became something more than just a creature of the wild. It became a lifeline, leading him away from danger, away from the shadows that had been chasing him. And for the first time since he had stumbled into the forest, Ben felt like there was hope. As Ben limped forward, leaning on the wolf for support, he couldn't help but notice how massive the creature was. It moved with a grace that was almost unnatural for something so large, its every step purposeful and confident. Despite the intimidating size of the wolf, there was an odd sense of calm that radiated from it. The creature didn't rush or seem desperate to lead him anywhere. It simply walked beside him, guiding him with an almost gentle certainty. Ben couldn't tear his eyes away from it. His mind tried to reconcile the wolf's imposing presence with its surprising behavior. This wasn't an animal driven by instinct, at least not in the way he expected. The wolf's fur, thick and wild, was streaked with patches of gray and white, giving it an ethereal, almost ancient appearance. It wasn't the kind of wolf Ben had ever seen before. This one was different. Its coat wasn't just fur. It looked almost like a blend of shadows and moonlight, as if it belonged to a different world entirely. Ben felt a strange pull toward the wolf, an unspoken connection that made him feel both awestruck and unsettled. He hadn't even realized how close they had become until he felt the heat of the wolf's body brushing against his own as it walked beside him. But it wasn't just the wolf's size or its striking appearance that captured Ben's attention. It was its eyes. Those eyes were unlike anything Ben had ever seen. They glowed faintly in the darkness, piercing and wise. There was an intelligence in them, something far deeper than the usual animal instinct. Ben had never encountered an animal that seemed to understand him on such a level. The gaze was not just that of a creature. It was as if the wolf was looking straight into his soul, reading him, assessing him with an almost human-like awareness. The way the wolf's eyes locked onto his, steady and unblinking, made Ben feel exposed, yet not in a threatening way. It was as though the wolf could see the fear and confusion swirling in his heart and was offering a kind of unspoken reassurance. For the first time, Ben started to wonder if this wolf was something more than just an animal. It felt like there was a presence, a knowing in its eyes that surpassed anything he could explain. Was it simply a creature of the wild, or was there a deeper, more mysterious force at play here? Ben couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't just walking beside a wolf. He was walking beside something ancient, something purposeful. The wolf's calmness, despite its power, only deepened the mystery. Ben's heart pounded as he tried to make sense of the strange bond forming between them. But every time he thought he might have an answer, the wolf's gaze reminded him that there was far more to this creature than he could ever understand. As Ben continued to lean on the wolf, every step he took felt heavier than the last. The pain in his leg was sharp, but it was overshadowed by the confusion clouding his mind. His instincts screamed at him to remain cautious. After all, he had heard the stories. Wolves were predators, solitary hunters that showed little mercy to anything weak or vulnerable. He had been taught from a young age that you never trusted a wild animal, no matter how calm it seemed. But here he was, limping through the forest, with a creature that should have been a threat walking right beside him. Ben couldn't make sense of it. His heart raced as he tried to understand why the wolf hadn't attacked. Every nerve in his body screamed for him to run, to get away before it decided to turn on him. But the wolf's behavior made no sense. It wasn't aggressive, not in the least. If anything, it was protective. The wolf stayed close to him, its body brushing against his as it guided him through the forest. Every time he faltered, the wolf would nudge him gently, urging him forward. If it were any other animal, Ben would have expected it to turn on him by now, but the wolf never showed a shred of hostility. Instead, it remained calm, its movements steady, as if it understood his pain and was doing everything it could to keep him safe. Ben's thoughts spiraled. Why wasn't it attacking? Why was it helping him? It didn't add up. He had heard countless tales of wolves stalking humans, circling them with hunger in their eyes. But this wolf didn't fit any of those stories. It wasn't showing hunger or aggression, only a quiet, almost patient presence that unnerved him. It felt like the wolf was waiting for something. But what? And why had it chosen him? The more Ben tried to rationalize the situation, the more questions piled up, and with each unanswered question, the unease grew. His fear wasn't just about being in danger anymore. It was about the unknown, the mystery of the wolf's behavior. What was its purpose? Why had it come to his aid? Was it simply a creature following its instinct, or was there something deeper at play here? The uncertainty gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the edge of something far bigger than he could understand, and it left him feeling both terrified and captivated by the creature beside him. As the minutes stretched on, Ben's heart began to slow, but his mind remained a chaotic storm of confusion. He couldn't ignore the wolf's presence, the way it stayed by his side with quiet assurance. There was no growl, no bark, no sign of the creature's natural instincts taking over. It was as if the wolf had made a silent promise to him, a vow to stay close and protect him. It never strayed more than a few feet from him, its movements purposeful and calculated, its gaze always alert, scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. Ben's own steps grew slower as the pain in his leg worsened. But with every hesitant movement, the wolf was there, its body a reassuring presence beside him. Whenever Ben stumbled, the wolf would gently nudge him forward, guiding him with an almost imperceptible force. It didn't bark or whine as a dog might. It simply was there, always a few steps ahead, its movements steady and deliberate. Its silence was unnerving in itself. Ben had never known a creature so calm, so in tune with the world around it. He was used to animals being vocal, reacting to things in their environment, but the wolf was different. It didn't make a sound, yet there was a weight to its silence that felt heavier than any noise. Despite the wolf's quiet demeanor, there was a constant awareness in its actions. It was as though the creature was waiting for something, perhaps a sign or a signal. Ben couldn't help but feel that the wolf was somehow more than just an animal. The bond between them, though wordless, was undeniable. The way it moved beside him, the way it watched over him, was like nothing he had ever experienced. Ben's mind raced. Why had the wolf chosen him? What did it want? He had never felt so exposed, yet the wolf's presence seemed to offer a strange kind of safety. It wasn't an instinctive protection like a mother watching over her cubs, but something deeper, more intentional. The wolf's silence spoke volumes, its actions more eloquent than any words could convey. But the more Ben tried to understand it, the more questions arose. What was this creature? Was it truly just helping him because it was kind, or was there a deeper reason behind its actions? He couldn't escape the feeling that something more profound was unfolding. And though his mind was clouded with doubt, his heart couldn't deny the bond forming between them. But the question remained, what was the wolf's true purpose? As Ben limped forward, his steps growing heavier with every movement, the forest around him seemed to grow more oppressive. The shadows deepened and the air felt thicker, as though the trees themselves were closing in. The wolf never strayed far from his side, its movements careful and deliberate, but there was a shift in the air, a subtle tension that Ben couldn't ignore. It wasn't just the weight of his injury or the fatigue pulling at his limbs. No, something was wrong. He could feel it in the way the wolf moved. The creature was still, but there was an intensity in its gaze, as if it was constantly scanning the surroundings, alert to a threat that Ben couldn't yet see. Ben's eyes drifted to the ground as they continued their trek. The trail, once familiar and welcoming, was now marked by signs of a struggle. Broken branches, their splintered ends jagged and raw, lay scattered across the forest floor. The earth beneath his feet seemed disturbed, like something had passed through recently with force, leaving behind a chaotic trail of disarray. Ben's heart rate quickened as his mind connected the dots. The air felt charged, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. He couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The growls and howls he had heard earlier echoed in his mind, but now there was no sound. The silence was oppressive, as if even the creatures of the forest were lying in wait. Ben's eyes scanned the broken branches, the tracks in the dirt, his heart pounding with each step. These weren't the marks of an animal simply passing through. These were signs of a struggle, of something powerful and dangerous. And the closer they moved into the woods, the more those signs became impossible to ignore. The wolf's pace never slowed, but Ben could feel the creature's heightened awareness. It wasn't just guiding him anymore, it was protecting him, its body tense with the knowledge of a looming threat. As Ben looked at the tracks, he realized that they weren't just any tracks. They were unlike anything he had seen before. They were large, deeper, more erratic than the prints of a regular animal. Something far more dangerous had passed this way. And the fact that the wolf was so calmly leading him forward despite the signs of danger only deepened the mystery. Why hadn't the wolf taken him back, away from this danger? Why was it pushing forward as if it knew the way? Ben couldn't stop the questions that flooded his mind. Whatever was out there, whatever had caused the chaos in these woods, it was drawing closer, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking right into its path. Tension in the air was suffocating. Ben's every step felt heavier, and the silence that had surrounded him like a thick blanket now felt like a trap closing in. His heart pounded in his chest as he limped forward, his injured leg burning with every movement. The wolf remained by his side, but its behavior had shifted. It no longer walked with calm assurance. Now it moved with purpose, its body tense, every muscle coiled and ready. Ben could sense it, too, the weight of an unseen presence in the woods, watching them, waiting. Then, without warning, a low growl broke the stillness. It was deep and guttural, sending a shiver down Ben's spine. His body froze instinctively, and his head snapped to the side. He had heard that sound before, the same growl that had haunted him in the distance, but now it was different. It was closer, much closer. The air grew colder, and Ben's breath caught in his throat as he turned his gaze toward the source of the sound. There, just beyond the trees, he saw them. A pair of glowing eyes, cutting through the darkness like two lanterns in the night. The eyes locked onto him, unblinking, and a surge of fear gripped Ben's chest. Before he could react, the wolf moved with incredible speed, positioning itself between Ben and the eyes. It growled in response, a fierce, protective sound that vibrated through the air. The wolf's stance was defensive, its body low, hackles raised, a warning. Ben's heart raced as he realized what was happening. The wolf wasn't just walking beside him. It was protecting him, standing guard against something far worse than he could imagine. Ben's mind raced as he watched the wolf, feeling the weight of the situation settle in. He had thought the wolf was just guiding him, offering comfort in a moment of fear, but this was different. This was a fight for survival. The glowing eyes were not a mere predator. They were something more, something darker, and the wolf was standing between him and that danger, unwilling to let him face it alone. As the growl from the unseen creature echoed once more, the wolf moved, its eyes never leaving the shadowy figure in the distance. Ben could feel the heat of the wolf's body, the raw power in its muscles, the sheer determination in its every movement. There was no hesitation in the wolf's actions, only an unwavering commitment to protect. Ben's fear intensified, but so did his sense of awe. This was no ordinary animal. This was a creature with a purpose, and it was here for him. And as the growl of the unknown creature grew louder, Ben knew one thing for certain. He wasn't facing this danger alone. The wolf was ready to fight, and so would he. The moment the growls grew louder, the wolf's body tensed even more, its muscles coiling like a spring, ready to snap. Ben could feel the shift in the air, the heaviness of the approaching threat settling over him like a suffocating fog. His heart raced, and for a brief moment he wished he could run, but his injured leg held him in place, the weight of his fear keeping him rooted to the ground. The wolf, however, was different. It was ready, poised, and focused, its gaze never leaving the dark shadows closing in around them. Without a single warning, the wolf lunged forward, its massive form moving with an incredible speed and power that Ben had never seen before. The growls from the surrounding shadows grew louder, more menacing, and in an instant, Ben realized they weren't alone. A pack of large, shadowy wolves emerged from the darkness, their eyes glowing with hunger and malice. They moved in unison, circling them, their presence overwhelming, suffocating the space around them. Ben's body stiffened in terror, but the wolf by his side didn't falter. It was no longer just protecting him, it was fighting. The first wolf leapt at the pack, meeting them head-on with a ferocity that made Ben's stomach drop. The battle wasn't just for survival, it was for his life. The wolf fought with everything it had, its teeth bared, its body slamming into the others with a raw, unrelenting force. It wasn't just defending itself, it was protecting Ben with a devotion that left him breathless. The larger wolves tried to overpower the wolf, their strength formidable, but the creature beside Ben wasn't backing down. It fought tooth and nail, its growls mingling with the snarls of the pack. Ben could hear the sounds of claws scraping against earth, the brutal crash of bodies colliding, and the sharp, aggressive snaps of teeth. It was chaos, but the wolf's movements were calculated, efficient. Each strike seemed deliberate, each defense purposeful. It wasn't just an animal acting out of instinct, it was a protector, fighting with loyalty that Ben could feel in every beat of his own heart. As the battle raged on, Ben could do nothing but watch, his body frozen in place. He had never seen an animal fight like this. So determined, so fierce, with a sense of purpose that transcended survival. The wolf wasn't just defending itself, it was defending him, fiercely and without question. It was a loyalty that Ben had never expected from a wild creature, and in that moment he understood something deeper. The wolf wasn't just a protector, it was his guardian, and it would fight until the end to keep him safe. The battle had been brutal, and as the final echoes of growls and snarls faded into the distance, Ben found himself standing in a silence that felt both unnatural and deafening. His heart still pounded in his chest, but now it was filled with a mix of awe and fear. The wolf, the protector that had stood between him and the vicious pack, was hurt. Ben could see it now. The way the wolf's movements were slower, more deliberate. Its body, once sleek and strong, was now marked with wounds. The wolf's fur was matted with blood, and there was a distinct limp in its step. Yet despite the obvious pain, the creature never faltered. The wolf's eyes, though exhausted, remained sharp and watchful. It glanced at Ben only briefly, as if acknowledging the danger had passed, but there was still more to be done. With every step, the wolf's leg dragged slightly, and Ben could see the strain in its movements. It was hurt, but it didn't stop. It didn't slow down. The wolf, with a quiet determination, continued to lead Ben forward through the forest, its body heavy with injuries, but its spirit unbroken. Ben could feel the wolf's resilience in every movement, and though the animal was clearly in pain, it never once stopped to rest or to recover. There was something almost sacred about its persistence, something that made Ben's heart ache with gratitude. Ben, still limping from his own injury, wanted to help, but he couldn't bring himself to approach the wolf. The creature was leading him through the darkness, and there was no time for pause. With each step, Ben's sense of gratitude deepened, but so did a strange, unspoken connection between them. It was as though the wolf was not just guiding him through the forest, but guiding him towards something deeper, something beyond survival. Ben had never felt so connected to an animal, so reliant on it, yet so utterly moved by its loyalty. The wolf's injuries didn't seem to matter to it. Its focus was on Ben, on the journey ahead. It wasn't just a protector in that moment, it was a companion, a guide, and a friend. Ben couldn't shake the feeling that something profound was happening between them. The wolf had risked its life for him, and even now, injured and tired, it was still pushing forward. And in that moment, Ben knew that he would follow the wolf wherever it led, because in his heart, he understood. The bond between them had already been forged in the fires of battle, and it was something that could never be broken. As Ben and the wolf moved through the forest, time seemed to stretch on endlessly. The pain in Ben's leg still made each step a challenge, but he found himself leaning more and more on the wolf, not just for physical support, but for something deeper. There was a subtle shift in the air around them, a growing sense that this wasn't just a chance encounter, that the bond between him and the wolf was something profound. With each passing hour, Ben's confusion began to give way to something else, an understanding. It started with the way the wolf moved. It wasn't just guiding him, but actively protecting him from dangers he couldn't even see. Every time Ben stumbled or wavered, the wolf would subtly change its position, moving ahead or circling back to lead him around unseen dangers, like sharp rocks or hidden drops in the terrain. It was as if the wolf could sense the risks before Ben even knew they existed. There was an intelligence in its actions, a quiet understanding of the forest and its dangers that went beyond instinct. It wasn't just the physical protection that struck Ben, though. As the hours wore on, the wolf seemed to anticipate their needs. When Ben grew thirsty, the wolf led him to a hidden stream, its paw steps slow and purposeful. When night fell, the wolf seemed to know just where to take him, guiding him to a small, sheltered clearing where they could rest. Ben watched in awe as the wolf found the safest places to rest, scanning the surroundings before lying down, as though ensuring their safety first. It wasn't merely survival, it was as if the wolf was providing for him in ways Ben couldn't fully comprehend, like an unspoken promise to guide him through the wilderness. The more Ben watched, the more he realized that the wolf was not just an animal. It wasn't a mere creature of instinct, driven by hunger or fear. There was something more, something deliberate in its actions. It moved with purpose, and it understood in ways that made Ben feel like he was in the presence of something ancient, something that had lived far longer than he had. The quiet loyalty in the wolf's actions made Ben feel both humbled and awestruck. It was then that Ben truly understood. The wolf wasn't just guiding him through the forest to safety. It was guiding him towards something greater, something he couldn't yet see. And in that moment, the bond between them deepened in ways that words could never express. It wasn't just a creature helping a lost soul. It was a protector leading him through darkness, offering something far more precious than just survival: wisdom, guidance, and a silent promise that they weren't alone. As they continued their journey through the forest, Ben's thoughts grew increasingly tangled. The bond between him and the wolf had deepened beyond anything he could explain. It wasn't just a connection born of survival. There was something else, something older, that tugged at his mind. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but each time he looked at the wolf, its intelligent eyes, its deliberate movements, Ben felt as though he should know more. Something about the wolf seemed familiar, as if it had been part of his life long before this moment. During their brief moments of rest, as the wolf lay beside him, Ben's mind wandered back to stories his grandfather had told him, tales of ancient guardians that roamed the forest, creatures that were both protectors and guides. He remembered hearing about wolves, the protectors of the land, chosen by fate to watch over those who ventured into the woods. Ben had always dismissed those stories as nothing more than folklore, myths passed down through generations. But now, in the silence of the forest, those stories began to take on a new meaning. Could it be possible? Was this wolf connected to something more than just the wilds of the forest? Ben's mind raced, replaying every interaction he'd had with the wolf, every moment when it seemed to understand more than just instinct. The way it led him away from danger, the way it seemed to know when he needed water, when he needed rest, these weren't just signs of a wild animal. It was as though the wolf was fulfilling a role, something Ben couldn't remember, but felt deeply. A wave of realization swept over him. His memories, though faded, began to stir. He had grown up hearing tales about the guardians of the forest, but had he ever believed them? Was it possible that this wolf was one of them? The more Ben thought about it, the more everything began to fall into place. The connection he felt wasn't a coincidence. It was a deep, ancient bond, one that transcended the natural world. He wasn't just being protected by the wolf, he was being led by it towards something far greater. As the night grew deeper, the forest seemed to shift around them, the shadows growing darker and the air colder. Ben, exhausted from their long journey, had almost grown used to the silent, watchful presence of the wolf. Every step they took together felt like a quiet, unfolding mystery. But tonight, something was different. The wolf, as always, led the way, but its movements were more deliberate, its steps taking them deeper into the forest than they had ever gone before. Ben's mind was clouded with the physical pain of his leg and the weight of the unknown, but there was an undeniable sense that the wolf was guiding him toward something important. With each step, Ben felt a tightening in his chest, a sensation that was both unsettling and intriguing. The wolf moved with purpose, not straying from its path, and Ben followed, despite the growing unease. The forest around them seemed to become quieter, as though even the wind had stopped, holding its breath in anticipation. It was then that the wolf stopped abruptly, its head turning slightly, as if to check that Ben was still following. Without hesitation, the wolf pushed forward, leading Ben to a hidden opening in the side of a mountain, a cave, half obscured by thick vines and moss. Ben's breath caught in his throat as they stepped into the darkness of the cave. The wolf, ever calm, moved inside first, its eyes glowing faintly in the shadows. Ben hesitated, his pulse quickening, but something in the wolf's steady gaze urged him forward. Inside the cave, as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, Ben saw it, a forgotten altar, ancient and weathered by time. The stone was carved with symbols he couldn't understand, worn by centuries of neglect, yet it exuded an undeniable power. The air felt different here, thick with history, with a presence that Ben couldn't quite grasp. A sudden wave of memory hit Ben, and his breath faltered. The stories his grandfather had told him, tales of wolves as guardians of the forest, protectors who had watched over humans for centuries, flooded his mind. He remembered the stories of sacred places hidden deep within the woods, of ancient protectors bound to the land. The pieces began to fall into place. The wolf wasn't just a creature of the wild. It was one of those guardians. This wasn't just an accidental encounter. It was part of something much larger, something ancient. As Ben stood before the altar, the weight of the realization pressed down on him. The wolf, which had guided him, protected him, and stayed by his side through every trial, was not just a companion. It was a protector, a part of a legacy older than he could comprehend. The bond between them had been formed for a reason, and now the truth was clear. He wasn't just a wanderer in the woods. He was part of something much greater, and the wolf was leading him toward it. As Ben stood before the ancient altar, his mind still reeling from the sudden flood of memories, the wolf moved closer to him, its presence both calm and commanding. Ben's eyes followed the creature as it approached, its wounded body still carrying an undeniable strength. Despite its injuries, the wolf stood tall, its eyes steady and unflinching as it watched him with a quiet intensity. There was something deeply knowing in those eyes, something that seemed to have been waiting for this moment for Ben to understand. Ben's heart beat faster as a sudden realization gripped him, sharper than any pain in his leg or body. The wolf was not just an animal, it was something far greater. The stories his grandfather had told him began to make sense. The whispers of forest guardians, protectors who had been chosen to guard humanity against a darkness that had haunted the woods for centuries. Ben had dismissed those stories as mere legends, fairy tales meant to entertain and scare. But now, standing in the presence of this wolf, he knew with certainty that they were more than that. The wolf was part of that ancient legacy, a guardian chosen long before Ben was born. The realization hit him hard, like a wave crashing over him. The wolf wasn't simply helping him to survive in the forest. It had been assigned to protect him, to keep him safe from something far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The dark force that had been stalking them was not just a wild predator. It was an ancient evil, a malevolent presence that had existed for generations. And the wolf, despite its wounds, had remained by his side, its loyalty unwavering, because it had been bound by a sacred duty to protect humanity from that very force. Ben felt a surge of gratitude, mixed with awe and disbelief. He had never considered himself important, just a lost hiker in the woods. But now, standing with this guardian, he realized that he had been part of something much larger than he could comprehend. The wolf's loyalty was not born out of chance or friendship. It was a commitment, a bond forged through centuries of duty and honor. The wolf had chosen him, or perhaps had been chosen for him, to protect him from a danger that had been waiting for centuries to be unleashed. As the wolf sat silently by his side, Ben could feel the weight of its loyalty. It wasn't just an animal, it was a guardian, a protector who had sworn an oath to defend humanity, and Ben was a part of that mission now. The sense of responsibility and trust in the wolf's eyes was overwhelming. Ben knew in that moment that they were in this together, no longer just a hiker and a wild animal, but two beings bound by a purpose that transcended anything either of them could have imagined. The journey ahead was dangerous, but with the wolf by his side, Ben felt a strange sense of courage and resolve. The dark force in the woods was waiting, but so was the wolf, loyal, steadfast, and ready to protect him, no matter the cost. As Ben and the wolf moved deeper into the forest, a heavy, suffocating tension began to settle in the air, unlike anything Ben had ever felt before. The wolf, usually so calm and collected, seemed more alert now, its senses stretched taut, every muscle in its body coiled in readiness. Ben could feel it too, the creeping unease that gnawed at his very soul. The closer they came to the heart of the forest, the more oppressive the air felt, thick with an unnatural chill that seemed to seep into his bones. His mind, already overwhelmed with the revelation of the wolf's true purpose, was now filled with an unshakable sense of dread. Then, like a shadow rising from the depths of his own fear, the truth began to unfold. Ben remembered the growl, the eerie howls, the eyes that had watched them from the darkness. He remembered how the wolf had responded with such ferocity, defending him with a loyalty that went beyond anything he had ever known. The realization hit him like a jolt of cold electricity. The creature that had attacked them earlier wasn't just an animal or a simple predator. It was something darker, something that had been waiting, stalking the woods for centuries. The wolf's movements grew sharper, more cautious, as it led Ben through the forest. Ben could sense that the wolf understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't a mere hunt for food or survival. This was a battle between light and shadow, a fight against something far older and more dangerous than either of them. The creature they had encountered wasn't just a beast, it was a manifestation of the dark forces that haunted the forest. A being that thrived on fear and darkness, feeding off the terror of its prey. It was ancient, older than the trees themselves, and it was growing stronger. Ben's heart raced as he understood that the wolf was not just protecting him from wild predators, but from something far more insidious. A creature that sought to engulf everything in its path, feeding on the very essence of fear. The dark force wasn't just a physical threat, it was a psychological one. A force that could warp reality, twist minds, and consume the light within. Ben had seen the wolf fight with such passion, but now he could see the exhaustion in its eyes, the wariness of a creature that had been battling this darkness for centuries. The wolf's loyalty wasn't just to him, it was to the very balance of the forest, to the world itself. As they pressed forward, Ben could feel the weight of the wolf's purpose. It wasn't just a protector, it was a soldier in an ancient war, fighting to keep the darkness at bay. And as the creature's presence loomed closer, Ben realized that he wasn't just being protected. He was being drawn into this battle, a fight against an ancient evil that had been waiting for the right moment to strike. The dark force was growing stronger, but so too was the bond between Ben and the wolf. Together, they would face whatever this darkness was, with the wolf's loyalty and Ben's newfound resolve as their weapons. As the night dragged on, the tension in the air grew even thicker. Ben's mind was still racing, trying to process everything that had happened and everything that was yet to come. His leg throbbed with pain, and his exhaustion was becoming harder to ignore. But it wasn't just his physical state that weighed on him, it was the deep sense of responsibility he felt. He wasn't just a lost traveler anymore, he was part of something much bigger. But as the darkness around them deepened, so did the bond between him and the wolf. Despite its injuries, the wolf remained close by, its movements more cautious than before, but unwavering. It was clear that the battle with the dark force had taken a toll, yet the creature refused to slow down or rest. It didn't matter how much blood stained its fur or how painfully it limped. It stayed beside Ben, its sharp eyes always scanning their surroundings, making sure no harm would come to him. Ben couldn't understand why the wolf wasn't retreating to heal or resting. The creature was hurt deeply, and yet its dedication to him never wavered. The more Ben observed the wolf's actions, the more he began to realize that this was not just a simple bond formed by the circumstances of survival. The wolf wasn't just a protector, it was his guardian, bound to him in a way that transcended mere species. Ben had seen loyalty before, but this was different. The wolf wasn't following him out of duty or necessity. It was staying by his side because something deeper tied them together. It was a bond forged in a time long past, perhaps even one Ben had forgotten, but was destined to remember. With each step, Ben felt the wolf's unwavering loyalty, but it was more than that. He felt it in his bones, in his soul, a deep, spiritual connection that transcended the moment. It was as if the wolf was not just protecting him physically, but guiding him spiritually, leading him towards something important, something Ben wasn't yet ready to fully comprehend. He realized that this wasn't just about surviving the forest, defeating the dark forces, or making it through the night. It was about something far greater. The wolf was not just a guide, it was a protector, a teacher, and a connection to a deeper purpose that Ben had yet to fully understand. As they moved forward, Ben could feel the weight of this realization settle in his chest. The wolf's loyalty was not just a trait, it was a gift, a bond that stretched beyond time and space. It wasn't just protecting him from physical harm, it was showing him the way, leading him towards something far more significant. Ben could no longer see the wolf as just a creature of the wild. It was a part of him, as if they were two halves of a whole, and whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Ben's breath quickened as the air around them grew colder, more suffocating. The forest, once a place of shelter and guidance, now felt like a maze closing in on him. The wolf had been leading him forward with such unwavering determination, but Ben could sense a shift in the air. Something was coming. The wolf's posture was rigid, its ears pricked and its body tense. For the first time, Ben saw the exhaustion in the wolf's eyes. It wasn't just a physical fatigue, it was a weariness that spoke of something deeper, something that had been brewing for centuries. Then, without warning, the dark creature appeared before them. It wasn't like anything Ben had ever seen. It was a shadow, a nightmare brought to life, with eyes that glowed like embers and a form that seemed to shift and writhe in the darkness. The creature didn't speak, but Ben could feel its presence, its coldness, its hunger. His heart slammed against his chest, and for a moment, he couldn't move. The fear that had been gnawing at him since the beginning of this journey flooded his mind, overwhelming him. He had always been afraid of the dark, of the unknown, of things lurking just beyond the edge of his sight. But this creature, this manifestation of darkness, was more than just a physical threat. It was a fear incarnate, feeding off his terror, growing stronger with every breath. Ben wanted to run, to escape, but he was frozen in place, the weight of his fear anchoring him to the spot. And then the wolf moved. It stepped forward, positioning itself between Ben and the creature, its body trembling with exhaustion but still filled with a fierce resolve. The wolf growled, a low, menacing sound that vibrated through Ben's chest. It wasn't just a protective instinct, it was a battle cry, an unwavering declaration that it would not let this dark force take Ben. But Ben could see the truth in the wolf's eyes. It was fighting, but its strength was fading. The creature before them was far stronger than anything Ben could have imagined, and the wolf's movements were slower, its growls weaker, as though every ounce of its energy was being drained. Ben could feel the desperation in the air, in the wolf's every breath, and the realization hit him like a thunderclap. The wolf couldn't protect him forever. It was fighting a battle it couldn't win alone. In that moment, Ben was forced to confront his deepest fear. Not just of the creature in front of him, but of losing the one thing that had been his constant throughout this journey, the wolf. He felt a surge of emotions, fear, helplessness, and a deep, aching gratitude for the creature that had given everything to keep him safe. But as the creature loomed closer, Ben knew something had to change. The wolf had fought bravely, but now it was his turn. Ben's heart pounded in his chest, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The dark creature loomed before them, its form shifting and twisting like smoke in the air, its eyes burning with malice. The wolf, standing firm and resolute beside him, was breathing heavily, its body sagging with exhaustion. It had fought with everything it had, but now the truth was undeniable. They couldn't win this battle alone. The creature they faced was too powerful, too ancient. The wolf, though still standing tall, was weakened, and Ben could feel the gravity of the situation pressing down on both of them. In that moment, as the wolf's eyes locked with Ben's, a silent understanding passed between them. Ben's mind raced with the thought of what was happening. The wolf had been his protector, his guide, and now it was preparing for something far greater than itself. The wolf didn't speak, but its gaze conveyed everything Ben needed to know. There was no fear in those eyes, only trust. A deep and unwavering trust that Ben would carry on, that he would survive this. The wolf was giving him its final gift, the opportunity to live, to fight another day. A wave of emotions washed over Ben: grief, fear, and an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He could see it in the wolf's eyes. This wasn't just an animal's instinct to protect, it was a sacrifice. The wolf knew it might not survive the battle ahead, but it was willing to face the dark force head-on if it meant giving Ben a chance to escape, a chance to survive. The bond they shared, one forged in loyalty and trust, was about to be tested in the most profound way possible. Ben reached out instinctively, but the wolf took a step back, its body tensing, preparing to charge. Its eyes never left Ben's, as if to say goodbye without words. And then, with a final powerful growl, the wolf surged forward into the fray, charging toward the dark creature, knowing that its own survival no longer mattered. It was a decision that weighed heavy on Ben's heart. The wolf wasn't just facing death, it was facing it to protect him, to give him the chance to live. Ben stood frozen for a moment, his heart breaking as he watched the wolf rush toward the darkness. The weight of the sacrifice hung heavily on his shoulders, but it also ignited something inside him, a fierce determination. The wolf had given everything for him. It was now his turn to honor that sacrifice. As the wolf collided with the dark force, Ben knew there was no turning back. He would survive. He would fight. And he would make sure the wolf's sacrifice meant something. Ben's heart raced as the wolf charged forward, its body a blur of strength and courage, fighting desperately against the dark creature. The world around him seemed to slow, as if time itself was holding its breath. Every moment felt like an eternity, the weight of the wolf's sacrifice pressing down on him with crushing force. The wolf was giving everything, every ounce of its strength to protect him. Its movements were fierce and relentless, its growls filled with an intensity that Ben had never heard before. The creature was distracted now, focusing all its energy on the wolf, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Ben felt a glimmer of hope. But as he stood there, frozen in place, something deep inside him shifted. It was as if the bond between him and the wolf had become something far greater than just survival. Ben could feel the love and loyalty the wolf had shown him, not just in the past days, but in every moment they had shared together. It wasn't just an animal protecting him, it was a companion, a guardian, someone who had given everything to ensure his safety. The overwhelming emotions rushed over him: grief, gratitude, fear, and love. And he knew, deep down, that he could not let this sacrifice be in vain. The wolf had given him a chance to escape, but Ben couldn't leave it behind. He couldn't run while the creature he had come to care for, the creature that had saved his life time and time again, was fighting alone. The love he felt for the wolf, the bond they had forged, ignited something within him, a surge of strength and determination. He wasn't going to run away from this fight. Not now, not when it mattered the most. Without thinking, Ben rushed toward the battle, ignoring the pain in his leg and the terror clawing at his chest. The wolf's sacrifice had shown him something greater. It wasn't just about survival, it was about fighting for what mattered, for those who gave everything for you. As he approached, Ben called out to the wolf, and for the first time, his fear seemed to melt away. The power of love, of this deep, unspoken bond, gave him the strength to stand alongside the wolf to face the dark creature head-on. In that moment, Ben made a decision. He would no longer be a passive participant in this fight. The wolf had shown him what true courage was, fighting not for yourself, but for those you love. And with that realization, Ben stepped into the fray, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that he was no longer alone. The wolf's bravery had lit a fire in him, and together they would stand against the darkness. Ben's heart thundered in his chest as he ran toward the battle, his legs burning with pain, his mind racing. The wolf had clearly tried to warn him, its eyes filled with a mix of concern and frustration, but there was no turning back now. The creature he had come to rely on, the protector that had given everything for him, was locked in a desperate fight, and Ben couldn't stand by any longer. He could feel the weight of the wolf's sacrifice pressing on him, urging him to act. The love he felt for the wolf surged within him, pushing aside all fear and doubt. The forest seemed to blur around him as he sprinted toward the battlefield, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His leg throbbed with every step, but it didn't matter. All that mattered was reaching the wolf. The creature he had been so connected to, who had shown him what it meant to fight for something greater, was in danger, and Ben knew in his heart that he could not let it face this evil alone. The dark force still loomed, its presence like a weight on the very air, but Ben didn't hesitate. He had made his choice. He was going to stand with the wolf, no matter what. When Ben finally reached the wolf's side, everything around him seemed to fade into the background. The battle, the darkness, the terror, it all melted away as he placed his hand gently on the wolf's fur. In that instant, something indescribable happened. It wasn't just the touch of skin to fur. It was something deeper, something far beyond the physical. A surge of power, pure and overwhelming, coursed through Ben's body. It wasn't like anything he had ever felt before. It was as if the very essence of the wolf's strength, its bravery, and its ancient connection to the forest had merged with his own. Ben gasped, feeling the energy flood through him, filling every fiber of his being with a fierce, burning strength. His body, exhausted and broken only moments before, now felt capable of anything. It was as though the wolf's loyalty had transferred to him, giving him the courage and the power to fight back. The dark force, the creature that had terrorized them, seemed to recoil, sensing the shift in the air. Ben's heart swelled with a new purpose. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for the wolf, for the bond they shared, and for everything that had brought them together. In that moment, Ben knew he had made the right choice. He wasn't just a bystander in this battle anymore. He was a part of it, an equal. The wolf had given him its strength, and now he would fight beside it with everything he had. The power of their bond was undeniable, and with that newfound strength, Ben was ready to face whatever came next. Ben felt the surge of power coursing through him, his body now fueled by the bond he shared with the wolf. It wasn't just physical strength, it was a deep, raw energy, a connection to the wolf's spirit, its loyalty, and its fierce determination. Together, they faced the dark force that had terrorized the forest, a creature that had once seemed insurmountable. But now, with Ben standing side by side with the wolf, the darkness seemed to retreat, as if it could sense the unity between them. The battle was fierce, but Ben felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. Every strike he made, every movement, was in harmony with the wolf's actions. The wolf, though wounded and tired, fought with a bravery that matched Ben's newfound strength. The creature seemed to move faster than its injuries should have allowed, its growls filled with a fierce determination that Ben could feel in his bones. Together, they were unstoppable. Ben could feel the darkness weakening, the dark force that had once felt so overwhelming, now trembling under their combined will. The battle raged on, and Ben couldn't help but feel the bond between them grow stronger with every moment. They were more than just allies. They were two souls united, fighting for something far greater than themselves. Ben's heart raced, his fear replaced with a deep sense of determination. The wolf had given him everything, its strength, its protection, its loyalty, and now it was Ben's turn to honor that sacrifice. As the last remnants of the dark force were pushed back, the wolf staggered, its movements growing slower. Ben's heart twisted with a growing sense of dread as he watched the wolf's body sag with exhaustion. The wolf, despite everything it had done, was fading. Its fur, once strong and vibrant, was now stained with blood, and its movements were weaker than before. The wolf's breaths came in ragged gasps, and Ben could see the life slowly leaving it. With one final, strained movement, the wolf collapsed to the ground, its body trembling. Ben rushed to its side, his heart breaking at the sight of his loyal companion. The wolf's eyes met his, and in that moment, Ben could feel everything: the love, the pride, the bond they had shared. The wolf looked up at him with quiet dignity, its gaze filled with affection, as if to say that it had fulfilled its purpose, that it had protected him, and that now it was time to rest. Ben's chest tightened, his breath catching in his throat. He had never imagined a bond like this, one that transcended everything. The wolf had been more than just a protector. It had been his companion, his guide, and now, in its final moment, it had given everything for him. Tears welled up in Ben's eyes as he whispered a silent promise to the wolf, one that he would carry for the rest of his life. He wouldn't let the wolf's sacrifice be in vain. The wolf had saved him, and Ben would honor its legacy by carrying its strength within him, always. Ben held the wolf in his arms, feeling the last tremors of life fade from its body. The once powerful creature, now still, lay heavily against him. His heart shattered as he gently cradled the wolf, the weight of the loss sinking deeper with each passing second. The wolf had given everything for him, its loyalty, its strength, and ultimately, its life. Ben could feel the life force of the wolf ebbing away, yet somehow, it felt as though the spirit of the wolf lingered, still present in the bond they had shared. The wolf's body was cold, and its breaths had stopped, but the power of its spirit remained with Ben. Every moment, every decision, and every sacrifice that had been made in those final moments flooded Ben's mind. He realized that although the wolf was no longer physically with him, its essence, its strength, its wisdom, and its loyalty would live on within him. A deep warmth spread through Ben's chest, not from physical warmth, but from the spirit of the wolf which he now carried with him. Ben's mind raced with the weight of the promise he had to make. He could feel the wolf's eyes filled with pride and love, still looking at him as if urging him to carry the torch, to continue the fight that the wolf had started. The wolf had protected him, guided him, and shown him what true bravery and loyalty meant. Now, it was Ben's turn to honor that bond, to protect the forest, to safeguard its ancient beauty, and to keep the darkness at bay. With a deep breath, Ben gently laid the wolf's body down on the forest floor, pressing his hand to the ground for a moment of silence, a moment of reverence. Then, as he stood up, he felt the weight of his promise settle into his soul. He wasn't just a hiker anymore. He was a guardian, just as the wolf had been. He would protect the forest, honor the wolf's sacrifice, and ensure that its spirit would live on through his actions. Ben took one last look at the forest, the place where everything had begun, and with a sense of resolve that burned in his chest, he began his new journey. He was no longer alone. The wolf's spirit walked with him, its strength and its loyalty guiding him forward. Ben was ready to face whatever challenges came next, knowing that the wolf's promise to him had become his own. The forest was safe with him now, and he would make sure it stayed that way for the wolf, for the future, and for the bond they had shared.